Today I'm going to be showing you how to install your Arc Terminator plug-and-play EKPM3 cooling kit in your BMW E60 series. So come on and follow along and let's get into this install. So here are the tools you're going to need. Either a 1/4 drive ratchet or a 3/8 ratchet, a 10mm socket, 13mm socket, 8mm socket, a short extension, a T40 bit, a fuse puller tool, pair of scissors, and what's not pictured is a pop rivet removal tool, which would make your life easier, but it is not required. First thing you're going to need to do is pop your trunk and then go over to the side where your battery is on. That may be the driver's side or passenger side, depending on which country you live in. For us in the US, it's going to be the passenger side. And to access our battery, what we're going to need to do is, on most cars, there will be a pop rivet in there, a plastic one, that we're going to have to remove. And there will be one down over here as well. My car unfortunately did not come with one, so I guess the previous owner took it out. And then there's going to be an additional pop rivet up here, which we're going to have to remove as well in order to be able to access the EKP module, as well as a T40 bolt, which we'll get to right after we get this this whole piece off right here. And once you've removed your pop rivets for where the battery is, we can go ahead and we're going to lift up this carpet here. And we're going to lift up this piece underneath the carpet. And what we can do is we can take this, kind of just pull it up first, and then it'll kind of pop out just like that. And we can go ahead and we can set this aside somewhere. These pop rivets are much easier to remove with a pop rivet removal tool. Unfortunately, I've misplaced mine, but there will be a link in the description below on where you can buy the tool to help you remove these pop rivets much faster. We have one more rivet down here, which I forgot to mention. We're gonna have to get that one out as well. So now that we've got those pop rivets out of the way, we're gonna remove this cover to show the T40 bolt. Mine is kind of loose and broken, so it just kind of comes out. Yours might be a little more difficult because there is a tab here that's normally there. And for that, you can just kind of sneak a flathead screwdriver under here or a pick tool, like just about under where this is, and pry this open, and that will pop right off. We're going to take our T40 bit right here, and we are just going to go counterclockwise and get this out. Yours might be torqued down a little tighter than this. And if that's the case, I would recommend something larger than a 1/4 drive ratchet. Now that you've got your T40 bolt out, we can take this metal cargo strap hole down and we can move it forward just a bit, turn it about 45 degrees, and it should lift straight out just like that. And once that's out of the way, we can go ahead and move this carpet back a bit, which will show us our EKPM3 module, which we're going to have to remove in a short while. But before doing so, I recommend that you remove the negative terminal of your battery to avoid any electrical problems while doing this job. And to do that, we're going to take a 10mm socket, put it over this nut here, and then loosen it up, and then just pull this terminal up. Once you've loosened that nut up, we're just going to go ahead and take this nut all the way off. And if you have any accessories on your battery like I do, just kind of put them out of the way for now. And we can go ahead and we can lift this whole terminal up. It just takes a little wiggling to get it off, and then it's out of the way. And make note, if you have a connector style similar to this, you're going to want to put this somewhere safe. We're just going to put it over here. Safe enough. Now that the negative terminal's off and out of the way, just make sure you don't pull it too tight because you can damage some of the wires here. We're going to go back over to our EKPM3 module, and what we're going to do while we're here, we're going to just press in over here. There's a little clip. I'm going to press that in and kind of wiggle this white connector out. Should just come out pretty easily. And there's another one over here. This is a black connector. And then we're going to get those out. And then we're going to take our same 10mm socket to remove the nut up here and then another nut right down below it. Once you've taken your EKP module out of the car, what we can do next is I like to bring it somewhere where I've got space to work on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a screwdriver, small one, and we're going to put it in between these holes here to try to pry the cover off. Just kind of like this, where we work this one side at a time. And then this side will come up, and then you don't even have to work on the other side. It should just pop off. If it does get stuck, however, you may just have to repeat the same process on the other side. Now that the cover's open, we can begin the process to apply the heat sinks on the microprocessor, the RF inductor, and the motor controller as well. I like to take some of these alcohol wipes or swabs and just kind of gently go over the tops of all the components to ensure there's going to be a better bond between the heatsink thermal pad and the component itself. And once you've wiped these down and verified there's no dirt on them, then we can begin the process of putting the heat sinks on themselves. So now we're going to take the large heat sink that comes with the kit, and we're going to peel off this blue sticker that protects this thermal pad here. Helps if you have a bit longer nails. And we're going to put this heatsink in this direction, that way the air can blow over it. If your kit comes with a slightly different heatsink that looks like this, it can be put on any direction. Don't worry, they do the exact same job. So we're going to make sure that this goes on the exact center of the little microprocessor here. I'm going to drop it into place. It's not going to stick perfectly at first. And then we're going to apply some light downward pressure for about 30 seconds. So once you've applied the heatsink here, you should be able to pick up the board by it. That way you can see it's not going anywhere. However, you can also peel these off kind of easily, but during car or normal car use, they should not go anywhere. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take our medium-sized heatsink that comes with the kit. Again, this could also look similar to this one, depending on what was available and what came in your kit. And again, they do the same job. So we're going to put this in with the fins facing the same direction onto the RF inductor over here. The process is the same. You just take your nails if you have them, or maybe a small blade or something, or if you have a friend with nails that wants to help, by all means go ahead and recruit them. Okay, now that you've got the thermal pad showing here, we're going to do the same thing and place it right over the center of this inductor. And it might be easier to just kind of turn it around, see it from here. And when we place it on, ideally you don't want these touching the capacitor because they can also draw some heat in themselves. But if it does happen, it's not the end of the world, especially since you have active cooling now. Same thing, light pressure holding it down for about 30 seconds to ensure the bond between the thermal pad and the component itself. And once you're done holding on to that, we're going to go ahead and take now the smallest, which I find the most difficult one to remove the pad here. And same thing, we're going to just get this little sticker off of it. Actually, this time, this one easier. And once you have that off, we're going to put this in with the fins facing the same direction over the motor controller. And same kind of deal, just kind of get it as close to center as you can, and apply downward pressure for 30 seconds as well. So if you're running something like a Walbro 525 liter per hour fuel pump, or something that's going to cause a lot more amperage draw than a 535 liter per hour, or more than a 450 even, what I would recommend at this point you do is you can take these bolts off here, and these are going to be a T10. And if it's your first time taking these off, then they're going to be a little tight, so just be careful. And once those T10s are out, you can lift the board. It might be a little stuck due to the thermal pad here, so I would recommend maybe a small screwdriver, or ideally a piece of plastic or something, and just gently move it under this side, and maybe again over here if need be. But again, use something plastic. Don't use a screwdriver to avoid damaging your board. So under here you've got this thermal pad here, and we don't really know exactly what the heat dissipation rating of this is. It's only a 0.22 millimeter thick pad, but you'll be able to tell if your EKPM3 has had a hard life already. You can peel back this pad, and then you'll notice under here where the controller is for the pump, this area is a little more brown than ideal. That's because this PCB was designed to dissipate heat through the bottom here and transfer it over onto this aluminum plate like a heat sink. I would recommend maybe replacing this thermal pad with something with good known thermal conductivity, maybe something that's around 16.5 to 17 plus watts per meter Kelvin. That way you'll know that you're getting solid thermal conductivity between here and here, so you can have that component nice and cool. That is going to be your biggest source of heat, is that. And if you have an HW06 revision, an HW04 revision, you have a larger thermal conduct area than an HW06, which is a newer revision than this. However, with the benefit of active cooling, you're really going to be getting a lot of heat out of this case completely, instead of just having it all trapped in this case, and that may not be necessary at all, but it's just an extra step, or we don't provide right now, but we may in the future, depending on if it's something people ask for. However, during our testing, we found that the fan plus the stock pad works just fine. So if you've gone that route with yours and you decide to put a larger thermal pad on there, or one with good known or thermal conductivity, then you can go ahead and you can put this back together. With these little T10s, don't tighten these down very much at all, just enough to get slightly snug, because you can easily break this PCB. If you happen to have an EKPM2 instead of the EKPM3, the cover comes off the exact same way as the EKPM3 does. And once you've taken the cover off your EKPM2, you can go ahead and use your supplied alcohol swab and just clean off the surfaces of each chip, because we're going with a few. If you'll notice, there's a couple more components that we need heat sinks on for the M2 versus the M3. Mainly, you'll note that the difference would be that there's MOSFETs here instead of the other controller that's on the newer M3. That being said, your biggest source of heat is also going to be these up here. These don't really produce a whole lot of heat, but there's no harm in actively cooling them as well to prolong the life of your whole module. Additionally, you could also use a better thermal pad underneath here, as you could with the EKPM3, to increase your cooling as well. So once you've swabbed over the components and they're dry now, we're going to do the same thing as we did with the EKPM3, and we're just going to add these heat sinks on. And once you peel off the sticker on the back there, just going to go and make sure that we are even on here, or as close to it as possible. And once we're where we need to be, we're just going to press with a light downward pressure for about 30 seconds and hold. Then we're going to do the exact same thing with this longer one for this chip over here. And you'll notice that this longer heat sink doesn't quite cover the whole chip, but that's not a big deal, because again, these two chips here do not produce a whole lot of heat, especially in comparison to the MOSFET up here, which is going to be your failure point if anything. This is just an added benefit, so might as well have it, especially once you're in here. Okay, now it is time to add the heat sinks over here, and the orientation with these doesn't really matter very much. And you may have concerns seeing that these two giant electrolytic capacitors, especially in comparison to the solid capacitors of the EKPM3, it may seem that they're going to block a lot of the airflow coming from the fan. However, I've tested the case on both the EKPM2 and M3, and both of them have significant airflow going over all the components. And then we're just going to put the last one on this transistor here, and if you've got bigger hands like I do, it's a little bit difficult to get these on, but you can do it. All right, and it's going to be the same thing with the last one here for this transistor. We're just going to put another heat sink here. Orientation doesn't really matter if you have these type of heat sinks included with your pack, and all EKPM2 kits will come with exclusively these types of heat sinks. However, if you do receive these heat sinks on your EKPM3 kit, orientation won't matter for those. They will do the job just fine as well. So now that this is done, we're going to go over to the car for the install portion. Once you've added all your heat sinks onto your EKPM3 module in the previous step, what we're going to do now is we're going to take our new housing and we're just going to put it over the EKPM3 module, just as if it were OEM. My recommendation is to go and just watch the top here, because these might just take a little while to align up, just kind of like how the OEM case is. And you just want to make sure that this groove goes onto the purple part here and sits in there perfectly, otherwise the rest of it won't really line up. So on here, mine is broken over here. I did that during testing. Yours shouldn't break if you're careful. And once you have it all lined up, you just kind of snap it into place and just check around, make sure that is down evenly all over, which mine appears to be, and that means we're in good shape. And now we have the rest of the harness and the relay here. We're just going to take this twist tie off, and you can reuse that, throw it in the bin, do whatever you like with it. But for the meantime, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put this back over to where it was before. Okay, so we're just going to move the carpet back a bit, and we're going to pop this right back into its home, which is over here. And then we're going to put on our two 10mm nuts, just as the way they came off. Once you've tightened down your EKP module with your new cooler housing, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start onto the electrical installation portion of this. Now, in order to do this, we're going to need to remove the nut on your positive terminal, and for most models that's going to be a 13mm nut. Just going to remove that just like we did with the negative terminal, but we're not taking the terminal all the way off, we're just taking the nut off. If you also have more accessories on your car like mine, that's fine. This should work with them as well, as long as you have enough space on your bolt. So the next step we're going to need to do is we're going to have to mount this relay, which will be done behind this taillight over here. And the location that the nut's going to be is going to be down below your taillight assembly back here. And you see it right there, that is an 8mm nut, and we're going to remove that now. And before we can mount this up, we're going to need to take this fuse out, which can easily be pulled out by hand. And then we're going to take our relay over here and we're just going to mount it over that bolt, and then we're going to tighten that bolt back down. Once that's all tightened down, and you don't have to go too crazy on that, it's only an 8mm nut, so just make sure it's nice and snug. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our 2A fuse back into the relay. Depending on your own preferences, you can choose which circuit you'd like to add this fuse to, and make sure that it's a 12-volt circuit that only turns on when the ignition turns on. This is a 2009 535i with xDrive. We're going to be pulling this fuse over here, number 88. And this is the fuse that controls a 12-volt outlet in the trunk of your E60. And this turns on only when the ignition turns on. So I recommend using this one if you have the same vehicle. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this portion of the harness, which is this 2A blade fuse over here, and we're going to take our 20A that we just pulled, and we're going to put it right down next to it. And that'll just kind of click into place like that. And then we're going to put it in over here this way, right back into where that fuse came out of over there in slot number 88. This is going to be nice and out of the way from your battery cover. So the next step I recommend is to take this longer wire, and then we're going to run it up and kind of around over here and just zip tie it to the battery cable and then this harness over here, so it's also out of the way. Now you can run this any way you'd like. This is just the way I prefer to run mine. So I'm going to take this long cable over here, and I'm going to kind of, I guess, work from this side first, because we also have this longer cable that goes to the battery's positive terminal, which is left long on purpose so you can also route it this way. And this is the negative, the shorter one here is the negative terminal, and we're going to make sure that that can reach the negative terminal. So we'll make sure that our wire goes all the way down here and has plenty of slack. And the other three that we have here, we're just going to make our first zip tie connection up at about here, probably about another one either up here or over here, kind of depending on where you like to put it. We're just got to make sure that this is going to be able to reach, which it looks like it will just fine. So I'm going to zip tie mine over to here. And as of right now, I'm just going to use those two zip ties until I put everything back together, and then figure out exactly how much slack I have left, and then see where I want to put these other two zip ties that come with the kit. So at this point, I'm going to take the positive terminal from the wiring harness, and I'm going to put it back over here on the battery's positive terminal. And we're going to put the 13mm nut right back over. And then we'll be done with the positive terminal side of things once this nut is tightened down. And once you're squared away on the positive terminal side of things, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our negative terminal that we took off earlier, and we're going to have to put this bolt back underneath it. Make sure it'll come up just like that. And at this point, once you have your bolt back on there, we're going to put the negative lead off of the wiring harness onto the negative terminal of the battery here, and we're going to go ahead and put our nut back on. And I have a washer on mine, you may on yours as well. And then we're going to start tightening this nut down, but we don't want to have it too tight just yet, because otherwise we will not be able to get the terminal back over the battery post. So now that you verified that that's not going to go anywhere, you'll more than likely get a spark over here, which is fine and to be expected. There we go. So we have our light back on in our trunk. I hear some noises, as you normally do with these BMWs. And then we're just going to go ahead and we're going to tighten this nut up with our 10mm socket. We're going to get that nice and snug, but not too tight, because you can absolutely break this bolt. I've done it before in an E46. It's not a good time. All right, so now that we have everything wired up, kind of wired in its final place, I'm just going to take this zip tie and just secure this wiring harness up here. And then I'm going to take my last zip tie and then put this part of the wire down over here. And then just make sure you're nice and you cut your zip tie tails off. At this point in the install, I like to recommend that you leave your EKP module unplugged and you go ahead and you put your key in the ignition and put the ignition to on, and then we'll see if this fan powers up the way it should. So we're going to go ahead and put our key in. And then without having your foot on the brake pedal, we're just going to press the stop button and then go check out the cooler in the back. And as you can see, sorry about the annoying BMW chime, as you can see the fan is spinning. Should be able to hear it as well. It's not too loud once everything's back together, and you can feel a lot of airflow coming out of these vent holes on the top and bottom there, which means your components are cooling off nicely. I'm going to go ahead and turn the ignition off, and then you'll see the fan stop. Alright, so the fan has stopped now that the ignition's off, and there's only just a few little things left to do. So one of the things you may have noticed is that there's this piece of insulation here with a cutout over here. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take a knife or a pair of scissors, and we're just going to cut along here and cut along here and remove this piece of insulation. That way the fan has enough space to get fresh air. This part can be a little difficult, so just take extra caution, take your time, because you don't want to cut yourself or poke through your carpet here. But we can slip the scissors under here and just kind of start cutting. I recommend probably a bit of a sharper pair of scissors would be nice, but these are going to get the job done. And once you've cut out your square, you can just kind of peel this back off. It should come out all right. And the good thing is this usually doesn't leave too much dust or too many fibers that can get into your fan. But just in case, we're going to pull off as much of this stuff as we can, and then we're going to run over this with a vacuum real quick. Now just make sure there's no long strands sticking out after you've done that, and that there's not any really loose bits of carpet in there, because you don't want that sucked into the fan and then having the fan prematurely die. That's no good. So I like to make sure that this area is nice and clean. And now that that's done, we can go ahead and we can plug our EKP module right back in. So to do that, it's just like when you were taking it out. We can go ahead, doesn't matter which wire you start with. I'm just going to start with this one. And just make sure your cable's facing the right way. You don't have to press on anything. Just kind of slide that back in. And this one goes back in the same way you took it out. And now that that carpet's all out of the way and your wires are all back together, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our carpet back to where it should go. And you'll notice that there's going to be enough space in between the fan and the carpet you cut out, which is kind of hard to show on camera without there we go. All right, so that's where it will rest, and you can see there's a decent enough gap where a good amount of air will be drawn in, and we're not going to get anything stuck in the fan's impeller over there. And now that everything's all neatly wired up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to tuck everything back together. So we're going to put our pop rivet in here, our T40 bolt, and our other rivet down here as well. And once you've put your rivets back in place and you've tightened down your T40 bolt, we can go ahead and we can put our battery cover back in, which just requires you to lift this tray back up and then slide this over into place. That all snaps back into place, and let's see how it sounds with everything all enclosed. And yes, you are able to hear the fan with the ignition on, but you're not going to be able to hear it in the cabin unless you have no interior sound deadening or carpet that's factory for some reason. And maybe if you have a race car, then you'll be able to hear it. But otherwise, it is pretty quiet. and you may be able to hear it slightly from outside the vehicle when the trunk is closed, but if your car is running with the ignition on, you're not going to be able to hear it over your exhaust. Pardon my perspiration, Florida summers get hot and so do these garages. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions regarding this particular product, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. This is a product that I have made. I do own Arc Terminator, and this is something I've been wanting to bring to market for a little while now. And I figured while I'm doing my fuel pump, probably a great time to do it. And consider subscribing if you like what you see here, because I'll have more DIYs and probably some more products for the E60 coming up soon. Remember to hit the like button if you liked it, share it with a friend, and remember as always, keep it foul.